Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue. And today we are going to talk about a problem that is besetting the Indians and specifically the Hindus very badly in the United States. It seems to be a never-ending problem that we have gotten into. So, to discuss this issue of caste and the caste thing, the way it is getting branded on us, or all Indian Americans, ought to be a matter of great concern. And today I have the great pleasure in welcoming Professor Subhash Kak ji, who, if you do not know, then just Google and find out. He is an academician, a researcher, and has done enormous work in the domain of Sanatan Dharma, Hinduism, and everything that is related to that. And I was specifically struck by his 1993 article that he wrote on caste in India. Professor Ji, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Vibhuti Ji. I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation. As people know, there is no word for caste in any Indian language. This is the most astonishing thing that there is, that this word, which was coined by colonialists, has become such an important thing in Indian politics and Indian academia.
It has. And, somewhere along the line, though it is, as you very rightly said, there is no word equivalent to caste in our tradition, in our history, our literature, and our sanskar, has somewhere along the line, जो हिंदी का शब्द है, हम पे थोप दिया गया है. And that has somehow along the line got stuck on us. So tell us something about this. You know this. In the US, we recently, in California, the governor did not sign the bill, even though with overwhelming majority in the Senate, in the Assembly, State Assembly, the bill was passed. Now what we notice is that recently there was an article in Washington Post that this particular thing will continue in other states. So it's not over. In this regard, has caste become a pandemic for us Hindus, to use that word?
I think this is going to persist. And the reason is, as Indians become more successful, which they are the most successful community in the US. And as India becomes more successful, India is right now on a PPP basis, the world's third largest economy. And it's expected to become the second in the next 7 or 8 years on a PPP basis. On a nominal GDP basis, it's the fifth largest, but it's expected to become the third in the next 3 or 4 years. So there's all of these amazing changes taking place, and the world is taking note. And there's always dynamics when something is coming up. The whole thing of, upset about new forces coming up, or the new powerful person in the town, and then the guys who are already powerful get very upset. So this will be used, and this is a part of the human condition, that if there is something changing, the order is changing, there would be people who would want to pull down the ones who are the harbingers of change, or who represent this change. So I totally agree with the Washington Post assessment that this is not going to go away. So then the question arises, if it's not a real thing, it's not a part of the Indian tradition, how do we counter it? And that is a kind of a challenge, because in the last 100 years or so, the idea of caste has also been internalized by many sections of the Indian population, especially those who go through the universities and who read sociology and all that, or history, and some of them are good students, and they are given a certain view and they attach themselves to it, so they feel very emotionally invested. It's a kind of a visceral issue. Now let's go back. and ask what is really going on. Now, you and I agree, and everybody's agreed, that there's no word for caste in Sanskrit or any other Indian language. Now, what do we have is jati, which is descent, familial descent, which is true, which is jatis are all over the world, right? In America, you have, let's say, the Italian jati or the Sicilian jati, or there are subgroups within each. So you have jati, which is true, and then you have varna, and varna means class. And varna is mentioned in the Purusha Sukta. It's one of the great and powerful hymns of the Rig Veda. And there it's stated that the primeval Purush created four classes. Now, what does it really mean? And the whole thing is, bad ideas have consequences. If you misinterpret this, and if you're certain that your interpretation is wrong, this is going to create problems. And to add to that, why do some people become terrorists? I'm just going to segue slightly off for a short while, because they're given bad ideas when they're young. So perhaps if they had not been given those bad ideas, they would be like everybody else. They would also be aspirational. They would also like to do good. So what is the bad idea here? The Purusha Sukta, 4 classes, what it says is that all reality, all embodiments are to be viewed as something like the primeval Purush. In other words, the whole universe viewed as a being. The whole universe is a being. And this is replicated at different levels. Okay. Now, within the body, of course, we have the head, the arms, the thighs, and the feet, which are the 4 classes. But this occurs also in society. For example, the army represents the arms. You have to fight, right? You have to protect the country. Or the business people represent the stomach and the thighs, right? And all those who do the various services represent the feet, because the body can only rest on the feet, right? And then there are some people who do the analysis and so on. Now the important thing, which is where people in India have also gotten wrong. A lot of sociologists have gone wrong, or historians. And to add to that, there is a famous statement by Cicero, the Latin writer. He says, "There's nothing as amazing to see how wrong academics and journalists are. They would believe almost anything." And this is what's happened in India as well. So this idea of the being is replicated at every level, including the individual. Do you see that? So you have a society, and within the society, the army itself is replicated. In army, there would be people who would be doing the analysis. There would be people who would be doing the marching. There would be people who would be worried about the rations and the supplies and so on. And within the individual also, every individual is, when they are doing teaching or thinking or analysis, every individual, no matter who they are Brahmins. When they are fighting for their family or protecting their home, they are Kshatriyas. When they are working to put money on or bread on the table, they are Vaishyas. And when they are doing serving, you have to also be in the service of each other. For example, my wife these days often calls me to the kitchen and she says, "Would you please cut the vegetables?" So that is the service thing. So every human being, if the question is asked, a young person, like the emails that you have received from people, what varna am I? We are all, every individual is every varna at different times, right? But of course, each individual may dedicate themselves primarily to a certain role in their life. We make these choices sometimes for a variety of reasons. You are in college and you don't find a job, then you say, well, I'm going to become a professor. So, which is generally what happens, how people end up in academics, right? So then this is what you are dedicated to, but that doesn't mean that you're really changed. In fact, you'll find that a lot of professors, not only are they stupid, but they are really not open-minded, right? Which is what a true professor is supposed to be. So every individual is certainly a specific jati, but we should all be proud of their jatis, right? But whatever jati it is, and if our jati community that we belong to went through difficult times historically, let's say 100 years, 200 years, and people have reached where they have, that is all to their credit, right? To have triumphed in the situation that they were in. Now, let me also add the understanding or internalization of jati that has taken place in India in the last 100 years or so goes back to, I think, the famous 1901 census that the British made. And so these people, census takers, they farmed out, went to different parts of the country and they talked to different jatis. They said, "What varna are you?" They said, "We don't know what varna. We are this jati. This is all that we are." And they had their own priests. They had, because as I said, you have replication. The central idea of the Vedas, if we go back to the Vedas for understanding what India is the idea of replication at different levels, which in the Sanskrit slogan is called Yat Pinde Tat Brahmande, as in the cell, so in the cosmos. And this means not just, it doesn't stop in the body, it also is true within the body. There are specialized cells, right? You have the brain, but there is such analytical activity going on all over, as we have, for example, in the system of Ayurveda, right? You have the various doshas or dhatus, which do specialized things, but which are replicated all across the body, right? Now, the central idea that one should not forget is that every human being has the same Purush within them, the same Atman within them. See, this is the central idea. According to Hinduism, every human being is equal to every other human being. So every human being, because this Purush, according to the Purush Sukta, manifests itself in these four classes. They're not castes. The Varnas are classes. And to these classes, we attach ourselves based on what we are doing. Now, of course, it's also true that according to, you look at the Bhagavatam or you look at many other texts or the Puranas, where it's stated that the Varna is according not to birth, but according to your own gunas or your own propensity. Now, what that really means is that while every human being has all the four potential for all the four classes within them, it's also true that you and I and somebody else are born with specific strengths or, let's say, attitudes. See, for example, in my family, we are five siblings, and we were raised in about the same situation, but we are all different. In some say, we are also similar, but we are also different. So it's true of all individuals that there are some who want, in a family, somebody would say, "I want to be a soldier." And that happens in many families. Some people join the Indian Military Academy. They are emotionally attached to this idea that I want to protect my nation or I want to do something for fighting for my country. Well, there are some others who say, "Well, I want to become a school teacher or I want to be in the business world." So, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the other capacities also. The soldier is also a teacher at their home, right? Because when you have children, and especially in India, unlike the West, where um, a lot of families leave the task of teaching predominantly to the school. which is one of the reasons why America is in such a big problem, because in school, all kinds of woke ideas are being pushed right now onto young children who are not prepared to counter it. In contrast to that, in India and probably in China, a lot of the education was done at home. So a teacher is also a Brahmin at home. He's also a soldier at home, a Kshatriya at home, right? Or a Vaishya, because he also has to provide for the family. So I think this is what the resolution to this problem is. We must finesse it. We cannot keep on defending the way the colonial historians presented the social situation. And as my article, which was written for an anthropological journal, Mankind Quarterly in 1993, explains that all the colonial ideas of caste collapse when you present actual data. For example, this whole idea that it's a hierarchy, which is not true, even if you were to look at this, because uh, socially within India, when we are talking of jatis, all right, perhaps the only ones who were aware what family varna they were attached to were the Brahmins, right? Because many of them were priests. Although not everybody was a priest, only a minority of the so-called Brahmins were priests. But but now you go to Bali, Indonesia, you have Brahmins there too, who are not Indians. So anybody who attaches himself to the uh, to the career or to the aspiration of doing analysis and teaching, or become school teachers, or become leaders like the Americans in Boston who are called Boston Brahmins, right? So you want to be on the high ground and you want to tell the people, hey, do this or do that. But leaving that aside, in the Indian village or in the Indian countryside, it's not the Brahmin who's at the top. Who's at the top is the zamindar, is the rich person, because the Brahmins and the craftsmen and everybody else get paid by this person. See, the hierarchy is very different. And you and I, although we come from different parts of India, we know that if Brahmins were at the very top, every community would have been very happy to have their boys marry Brahmin girls. That's not true. That's not true, right?
That's
Or,
right.
or Brahmin boys, their girls marry Brahmin boys.
Right.
No, that's not true. Because if you are a Rajput, for example, you would say that, well, these Brahmins are otherworldly. We don't want our daughter to marry this boy, because there was, of course, a kind of a specialization of attitudes in India. Now, this other point, before I forget, which I want to make, is that there are some nasty stories about jati oppression, and we cannot run away from them, and they are true. But now let's go to the background of that. Until the coming of the Muslims, the Turks, India's share of the world economy, according to the comparative economists, was about 45%. India was the richest land on earth. And the proof of that is the incredible monuments that we have in India, the temples, etc., the likes of which don't exist anywhere else. Now, there were centuries of wars. And of course, there were periods where powerful empires devoted to prosperity came up. For example, the Vijayanagar Empire, right, which collapsed in 1565 for about 160 years. Extremely powerful. So when the Moroccan Ibn Battuta came to India, he says there is no city in the world as rich as Vijayanagar. So there was again prosperity. But when the British took charge, 1819, but they were already very powerful around 1800. India's share of the world economy is estimated to be 20 to 25%. So India was still extremely rich. The 19th century was a century of horrors for India. It's not that the British, unlike some previous conquerors, went around beheading people. But what happened in the 19th century was that in the first 2, 3 decades, industrial revolution took place in Europe, in Britain. They created these factories, and they could use with machines. They could have economies of scale, and they initially they put huge tariffs on Indian products, textiles, for example, and other products. And then they made India a dumping ground for their products. So in the 19th century, the Jati Vyavastha collapsed. India was impoverished. There were huge famines. According to some estimates, about 150 million people died, excess deaths because of the economic policies of the British. And so people, you know, there are also estimates that they actually took out $45 million worth. Britain took it out to develop their own subways, underground, this or that. There's cities that we like now, and this impoverishment of India, the Jati's collapse, led to oppression, because everybody was also fighting for themselves. It was a question of life and death. So we must see that within proper historical context. Because if you go back further, you look at the Chinese travelers like Fayan or Yun Sang, right? And they talk about their perspective on Indian society. It's incredible. What they say is there's literally no crime. Every jati is prosperous, and there's also huge flexibility. There is transition from one class to another, and we see that even in modern times. I don't know if you're aware of it. There is a very powerful community in Madurai called the Saurashtras, and they trace their origins to somewhere in Maharashtra or Gujarat about 800 years prior. And we have record of what they did in different times, and they were into weaving and so on. So what we see is that as a jati, their self-perception changed, and they ate meat and so on, and now they become vegetarians. They are some of the smartest people in the world. I know of Saurashtra families in the US where every child has gone to Ivy League, they've done their PhD, and now they have adopted attitudes which one would associate with the Brahmins, in other words, vegetarianism. Although even that is a complicated story, because not all Brahmins, which is the only jati which sort of was aware as to what varna they belong to, right? Because everybody else, almost everybody else, excepting the Rajputs, were all the varnas within themselves, which is true, which is the way it ought to be. So the Kashmiris, for example, the Kashmiri Pandits, they eat meat, and so do the Brahmins in Bengal. And of course, they have a very interesting theory to justify it. They say fish are the vegetables. They are jal tori. They are vegetables of the sea. So that's perfectly fine. So in other words, to come back, the academic idea of caste is totally false. It was created by the British for their personal ends. And in my book, The Idea of India, I quote the chief census guy during the British time, and he says that, look, we English derived the caste system, but we created it. He says, I'm just paraphrasing, I don't remember the
Yeah.
exact. He says, we created it. And I think that should be remembered. And I think, of course, it's also true that the recent politics in India is sort of, in some ways, the quota system is reinforcing the jati thing. But on the other hand, as the different jatis are lifted up by economic progress, it's becoming, everybody is mixing, and we see this, Indians in the West and Indians in the cities in India. So it's all changing. It's transitional. So this attack, um, from um, from vested groups in the West will not amount to anything, because India's rise is unstoppable. As I was mentioning, India is going to be this second largest PPP economy in the next 10 years, and probably the largest in the next 20, 30 years, and even nominal basis, the third largest in the next 5 or 4 or 5 years. And as you become strong, people listen to you. When you're weak, they tell you, this is what you are. This is what's been happening. The Western academics and their Indian followers are telling Indians, no, this is what you are. What your personal understanding and experience, that is not to be counted. We dismiss it.
Thank you so much for a brilliant opening in which, in a classic professorial and a wise guy, you have stated the problem where it belongs. You have also refuted the entire accusation of caste on us, and you have given a brilliant historical perspective. Now we are in the 21st century, and that statement of yours is remarkable, that as you are rising, there are people who are opposing you and they are trying to find the chink in your armor. So, my question here is again, Professor Saab, is caste the Achilles heel of India, which the rest of the world wants to bring us down? You just now stated, and correctly so, that India has slipped from 46% of the world trade to 22% of the world trade, and now we are trying to rise again in the PPP power. The question again is, why is the Indian community, the Hindu community particularly, becoming the victim of the machinations of what is popularly known as the conspiracy and the vileness of three groups of people: the extremists in the Sikhs, Islamists, communists, and what have you, who are कहते हैं थोप रहे हैं कास्ट का थिंग हमारे ऊपर. Whereas the reality is what you said earlier on, which is what I have told my American friends, which is what I told Rahman, the driver in Jaisalmer, that we are embodiment of every functionality within ourselves at any given point in time. So, जब सोचते हैं तो हम ब्राह्मण होते हैं, जब करते हैं तो क्षत्रिय होते हैं, जब पापी पेट का सवाल होता है तो हम वैश्य बनते हैं, and rest of us are service providers. That's the issue which is important. Why is it that we are not able to advance this argument as a pracharak, pravakta, to tell the truth to the people that it must be handled properly?
Well, we are. This program, for example, people who are listening to it get this other argument. And is the whole idea of caste, as understood by the West, India's Achilles heel? That's the question that you asked. Well, it will be used.
I will also add here, why I call it the Achilles heel is that your enemy doesn't want you to prosper, and you are prospering. You are defeating their goal, as a result of which they want to destroy you. And that's what I see here is a very interesting political machination, that while Bihar, my own home state, is doing a caste census, Congress party is promising a nationwide caste census, further dividing the Hindu community. And you are seeing in the United States the labeling of caste on all of us, you and I. Is it just a coincidence? That is another thing added to for your thoughts on this.
Well, there are two sides to it. One is we can look at it only in the American scene, the Indian scene, and the world scene, because India is becoming bigger and bigger, so it has all the three elements.
Right.
Now, the American scene, it's partly driven by envy. Envy on this side of the left, on the left, that Indians are, they sprinted past every community. They're the most successful, right? But one must also remember that Indians are also much loved. I live in the Midwest. I meet people in churches, in communities. We have American friends. Indians are the most loved ethnic group because we are good people. We are people. We are humanistic. Our values are humanistic. In fact, there was a person in Pakistan. She was interviewing me, and she's asking me, why are there so many Indians who are executives, CEOs of the biggest companies in America, heads of departments, deans, wherever you go, left, right, and center? Why do you find Indians? Are they helping each other? Because they are successful already. I told her that, look, that's not the case, because all these companies have American boards. These universities have American supervisors, board of supervisors, right? Or wherever you go, or you go to medical practices. Why are Indians rising? Because Indians are good people. Because at home, even if we don't know the Vedas, what we have been taught by our nanis and dadis is that be good to everybody. Samasta lokaha sukhina bhavantu. This is our main message. In all the worlds, everybody be successful, right? So this is what we are taught. And not only that, we also have an ecological view, not just us, not just human beings. I remember when I was a very young kid, my mother, when she would cook, and we were not rich, whatever she would cook, the very first as parts of the food, rice, whatever else had been cooked, she would put on the wall top for the birds, or if they were stray dogs, for the dogs. So ecological, be connected to all of life, everybody. Or if there's a poor person who's knocking at the door, give them food. Charity. These are the values. Danam, famous dialogue in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. What is a human being to do? To give charity, to consider everybody the same, which is different from other communities right now, with all the disorder taking place in Europe and America, where these communities say, we want to enslave non-believers or behead them and so on. So Hindus are not like that at all. Everybody loves Hindus, right? So that's one side to it. But now for the left, Hindus are a problem. Why? Because the very basis of Hinduism, it's a universal view of looking at reality, where we acknowledge both the body, we want material prosperity, but we also acknowledge the presence of something transcendental, which is the Atman, which is consciousness, where even sciences come in. Now, while for wokeism or for communism or for those who believe only in the body, where the body eventually goes to paradise and gets all wonderful stuff, right? For them, this idea of consciousness is some kind of blasphemy. That's a blasphemous idea. Because the Vedic view, the Hindu view, is that there is one being in the cosmos and we are a part of that being. That being interpenetrates us. It's transcendent, but it's also a part of us. So we are God also. We are also divinity. Because, so this idea is a challenge to the left. So people, the left in Europe, and we talk of George Soros and his, people who are in cahoots, or people in the left who are trying to see, okay, now how do we make sure that nationalism in India is put down and we are able to create a transnational, a world government run by the elite. This is where WEF and the challenges in America itself, or Canada and wherever else, or in Europe, to which right now, of course, there has been a resounding slap in Gert Wilder's victory in Netherlands. So for them, India is the main challenge. Because for them, other religions, for the wokes, they don't care for other religions. They say the other religions are going to fall away because they cannot challenge science. But for them, science is only materialist science. And the more advanced science, which is actually the uh, uh, consistent with all the findings that have taken place in recent times, and I've contributed to that myself as somebody who works in consciousness research as well as quantum mechanics, it leads to this idea that indeed reality is both materiality plus consciousness. And therefore, uh, the wokes or communists or the leftists in the West are going to fight Hinduism very bitterly. This is their challenge because that will go away. In fact, my own thesis is that as AI becomes even more powerful and as jobs disappear and as the world goes towards more of a childless situation, populations will collapse. People will all across the world will look at the fundamental questions of meaning and life, and there the question of consciousness comes in, and the only resolution to that can be provided by this eternal tradition, this Sanatan tradition that we are a part of.
This is so optimistic and so wonderful to hear you say what you said just now, because that's a school of thought I belong to myself. And as you earlier said, that we are a liked people in America is something a senator told me a long time ago. And I have shared this on this show several times, that he said, his exact words: "We love you, Indians, as immigrants to this country. You are professionals, you are hardworking, you are in the highest medium income, you have family values, you take care of your children, you are not a law and order problem anywhere, and you don't ask for anything." Now, this is very important. We don't know how you ask for anything because we have a very interesting dual approach to life of materiality and spirituality going together. That's what makes us who we are. And the world of consciousness is also rising very rapidly. But we live in the 21st century. Right now, the left, the wokies, those are movements that are designed to defeat and hurt us. So this question that came about, I tweeted some time back that a friend of mine, as a third instance of a child coming to the parent and asking, "What caste are we?" So we have never talked about caste. I have never told my son that he is a Brahmin, though he's a product of a Brahmin and a Jain lady. My wife is a Jain. I have never told him whether he's Jain or a Brahmin. He's just growing up as a great kid. Point is, how does one deal with that? Because if you do not deal with that, then just like the economy slipped from 46% to 22 and now to 2%, and then we are rising now, it will annihilate us, or will it not? So the question is here, how do we deal with that? How does one respond to these kind of attacks, which is hurting the children and the family network, the very institution that is a very powerful thing amongst us? The communists want to destroy the family system, which is what we are seeing in America too. The wokist part of the thing is destroying the family values. Your thoughts on that? How do we confront that going forward?
Uh, we have probably not done as well as we ought to in telling our story, which is a beautiful story. And I agree with you. Everybody loves Indians. Go to any country, go to Singapore, go to China, Japan, wherever you go, people love Indians because we are good people with values. We think of this life as well as larger questions. And that is really the hallmark of our civilization. And this is what the whole world needs, because now, the wokes are attacking us. The wokes are attacking us because the West itself is being hollowed out. The young in the West, in America, for example, are feeling hopeless, feeling this hopelessness, not necessarily in a material sense, but in the sense of what life is all about, which is why this attraction to drugs or fentanyl. 120,000 people died of fentanyl overdose last year, and the previous year, 120,000. In all the years of the Vietnam War, only 53,000 people died. Why is this happening? And not only that, American schools and colleges can't even produce people for their own economy. Why are Chinese and Indians all over, the crypto world, finance, Wall Street, the Bay Area companies? Why? Because American schools are failing. It's not that the American kids are not smart. American kids are as smart as any kids. But since the American parents and the system is failing to communicate to them what the meaning of life is, which is what we have done successfully in the past. But we might be failing to do so like the other Americans in the US, which is why the emails that you have received. So I think that's a very, very important question. We need to recognize it. And now, of course, the temples have their Bal Vihar and so on. But one's not sure everybody, whether they are able to include everybody. So I think programs such as yours, we have to do much more work to tell this, and not only to us. I think this is forgotten. Hindus or Hinduism is really a universalist thing. We want to include everybody, Americans too. There's no difference between us and anybody else, or no matter what their background might be. We want to teach yoga. Yoga is the technology which allows us, our bodies, our outer life, to get inspired by the infinite gifts that reside within us, within each human being. And yoga is already transforming the world. In fact, let me give you a very interesting piece of statistics. First of all, in my extensive travels all over the world, even the smallest towns, Peru, Czechoslovakia, you'll find yoga studios.
Yes.
I say the way we look at religious denomination, we say, okay, so many Hindus, so many Christians, so many Muslims, so many non-believers, right? And when we count Hindus, we are looking at, say, connections with the jatis which go back to India, right? Our jatis, for example. But really what Hinduism is, if you do the Vedas and so on, Hinduism is yoga. There are 6 darshanas. 5 of those darshanas are about analysis, right? Like Mimamsa, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Vedanta. That's an analysis, or Sankhya. But the darshan for life is yoga. Yoga is Hinduism. Yoga is also Jainism and Buddhism. We put these artificial categories, and yoga is sweeping the world. The 2021 census of UK, only 47% said they are Christian. And if you look at those who said they had no denomination, I would say they belong to yoga. One way to look at why Rishi Sunak became the prime minister, because the true religion of England, majority religion, is yoga, is the religion of self-empowerment and self-knowledge, which is what Hinduism is, which is what Sanatana Dharma is. And it has, you can do different, you can believe in any prophet or whatever. But Hinduism is the religion of self-knowledge and self-empowerment. It is sweeping the world already, and people are not aware of it. Your people who are listening to this, please go and look at the UK census figures, and that will explain to you why the English are prepared to accept, or they accepted Rishi Sunak, he's a Hindu who does all the outer things as well, because a lot of Hindus, just trying to be pleasant, would say that, look, I only privately I'm a Hindu, but otherwise I'm just a humanistic person. But he's a actual one who does all the ritual and so on. So there's a great change taking place which Hindus themselves are not aware of. And I would say that possibly yoga as a religion, the word religion itself also has no meaning in the Indian context, right? In India, it is, there's nothing like religion. It's dharma. Dharma is belief in the larger thing. And I would say that possibly Sanatana Dharma has more adherents right now in the US itself than followers of traditional religion.
You know, you have really said something that is very dear to my heart, and you and the audience who are watching will be very happy to know that I'm part of a team that established an institution called United Consciousness. And the one of the most fabulous things about this effort has been that we have brought in yoga establishments from over 120 countries into our realm of activities. And we are hosting our, first ever in-person United Consciousness event in Ujjain for Mahakal Darshan on December 15th, 16th, and 17th. And believe it or not, people from 5 continents are coming to share their spiritual and the consciousness values in that conference. So, people, you can visit the website of unitedconsciousness.in and look it up, because we are very proud of this effort that we did. And I also wanted to share that we recently held in Jaisalmer just 3 weeks ago, where I was there too, a, a conclave of Indian business practitioners, academicians, and public and private sector to bring about how to bring about the academic values and Sanatan principles and the universal consciousness values into Indian management practices. So we are working on that. So the audience would be glad to know people are doing certain things. However, I'll come back with that caveat in the remaining few minutes that we have, is that as the saying goes, India is a cricket playing country. You have to play the game in which you are, whether you are playing T20, one day international, 550 overs, or a test match. So at this point in time, there is a little bit of a desperation. The attacks that are happening on Hindus globally starts with America. It is happening in India. How does one play that game of T20 that is required to be honing in the talents and abilities to stop the flood of attacks? How does one deal with that? When it comes to 5-day test match, we will deal with it in a different manner. But right now, as a doctor friend told me, that if you're suffering from diarrhea, at that time, it's a wrong time to talk about wellness plans, how great the health is. It's time to get Imodium and stop the leak. So what would you, as an academician, professor, and you have done enormous work, your book, Idea of India, your article, 1993. I'm going to request Jaipur Dialogue to put it on the website, that article of yours of 1993 to Caste in India. How does one deal with that current situation, which is the primary concern of many parents, because we are individually hit at? How does one deal with that?
Vibhuti ji, excellent question, and I totally agree with you that we must fight each of these assaults as hard as possible, as was done in California. So we have to be pragmatic. We have to create whatever needs to be done on the ground, political alliances in the US, in Canada, and elsewhere to defeat these challenges. Absolutely right. So in other words, this battle has two aspects. Short term, on the battlefield, we need to do whatever needs to be done, right? Whatever is required. But at the same time, the larger sangram, if you will, the larger thing, what Sanatan has to offer cannot be countered. Let me give a slightly different perspective on this. Leftism is based on classical physics of the mid 19th century, which is when Marx came along and Marx and Lenin came along. Sciences have gone hugely beyond that. You had the relativity revolution, then you had quantum mechanics, which has changed everything, which in itself was inspired by the Upanishads. The creator of quantum mechanics, Schrodinger himself admitted that the central idea came to him from the Upanishads. So Indian thinkers and leaders need to be made aware that, look, the world, the global village, world as one village, the only way to deal with that is through science, and the most advanced science has sides both to the body and consciousness. And there is one tradition which speaks to that, and which is our tradition. But this tradition doesn't tell people that, look, you have to do this ritual, you have to do that. That's entirely up to an individual, or no ritual at all. But what is all embracing from Hinduism as, one consciousness, which gives a place, a space to people to see where they could stand on, as all the things that society or life had been based on is slipping under their feet, which is what's happening. The hollowness of wokeism, that are you even two genders? There is such hollowness that people are now saying, and confusing young people in school and college, that, look, you're not even man or woman, you are maybe something. There are 52 genders. There are, in some American colleges, they're even talking about that. So I think to find that that ground on which people can stand, and not only confront the actual challenges that exist, firstly challenges like the one that you're talking about, assaults on Hinduism, but also challenges of life. As jobs go away, there will be other challenges. And at the same time, find something wonderful through consciousness about life, which makes life worth living. So I think there are both these aspects that Hinduism provides, where we want to embrace everybody. And you don't even have to call it Hinduism. We call it Sanatan Dharma, which means
Right.
eternal principles, eternal laws which are true for everybody. And I think time has come for, as my friend David Frawley in a tweet yesterday said, this new Hinduism as Sanatan Dharma. New India, new Hinduism as Sanatan Dharma. That here we are going out and telling the world, because people are much more confident now. In the past, people would come to the Shankaracharyas 40 or 50 years ago, Europeans and Americans, and they would tell the Shankaracharya, well, how do I join Hinduism? And Shankaracharya would tell them, please be a good Christian, and that is fine. You don't have to. But I think that was because of where India was at that time.
Right.
But now things have changed. It's for us to tell everybody, hey, come along, join us. And this is a universal way of truth, and you can reject whatever is not truthful in it, because or whatever is not just in it. It's the path of truth. It's also called Satya Dharma, right? The path of truth. Sanatan Dharma is Satya Dharma. There can be only one truth. I think we should not only embrace it within America. Time has come for India to embrace it overtly, and not just hide. Okay, this is IKS, Indian Knowledge System, which is to be taught maybe in one class in school, on the side, when it doesn't hurt somebody else, or find other people don't find it offensive. No, truth. Time has come for us to embrace truth clearly, directly, and proclaim it to the world.
That's a big word, truth. That's what Vivek Ramaswamy talks about, truth, right? He's made it as an election campaign issue. And Rishi Sunak, you referred to him twice. Rishi Sunak did say, there is a man and there is a woman. In between, everything is a confusion. So the point of the matter remains here is that truth. We have the slogan, Satyameva Jayate. I always end my shows by calling upon people, Satyameva Jayate. Truth must triumph and truth must prevail. And for truth to triumph, people who believe in it must stand up and fight and be counted. How does one make that happen? Because it's tough to fight. Because the evil forces always overwhelm the forces of good until a period in time. So give us that hope. What must the truth do to eventually win the battle, which it seems to be, which is causing more distress and frustration at an individual family level. And that's a matter of concern because our enemies are attacking us individually, an individual unit. There is
If
no cohesive organization that to back us up. Where does that come from?
if Hinduism is yoga, we have to become yogis. And a true yogi is a warrior. We have to become warriors. um, like Zen is also from the word dhyan, concentration, attention. So we have to become warriors. We also, if we need to create new institutions, and you might be absolutely right, perhaps all the temple organizations, they have a body which joins them, but infuse more life into it. There are big challenges in India itself. Indian temples are not even free.
Right.
Part of the problem is that the English took over the temples, and we, after 75 years of independence, have still not been able to make them free. The intellectual capital that would have arisen in these temples, because temples were great centers of education, knowledge, the arts, and everything else, if you go back into history. Now, all that has been lost, because these temples now, the great temples of India, work only to provide comfort. People go there for pilgrimage, but all other functions have been lost. So I think you know, just as um, if you love yourself, you can love others only when you love yourself. That's one principle.
That's
The
right.
other is, if
Right.
you love yourself, others will also love you. We still under the pressures of colonialism in India, or colonialism narrative, have not embraced our own self properly, which is the reason why IAS officers run these temples, right? Or people who are inimical. There was a conference in Tamil Nadu a few months ago, and the title of that conference was "How to Eradicate Sanatan Dharma." Just
Right.
imagine if there was a conference in the US where powerful politicians attend, called "Eradicating Christianity," or a conference in Saudi Arabia, "Eradicating Islam." This is where we have been taken advantage of. We have not fought as hard as we need to. I think our problems in the West are minor. Our young people are doing very well. They are stars too. I see it all around. Young people in Miami or California or elsewhere. In the West, we'll have no difficulty with that. I think the real challenge, in spite of India's economic progress, is the battlefield in India. The temples need to be liberated. We need to be more assertive in teaching, not sectarian stuff. I'm not talking of sectarianism. I'm talking of teaching truth, whatever there is related to truth in the schools, telling people about it. And once we do that, the irritants outside of India will become even, no issue at all. Because as I told you right in the beginning, people love Indians, people love Hindus. They love them in US, in South America, in Canada, in Europe, because yoga is the new force which is sweeping across the world. And as a historian, I can tell you that something similar happened 2000 years ago, when yoga and Vedic ideas went from India to China and Japan and to the Slavic world, which is something that a lot of people don't know about, that these ideas also went to the Slavic world and
Yes.
transformed the Slavic world. So something similar and more powerful is happening now all across the world. Uh, Even Saudi Arabia has introduced Ramayana and Mahabharata in its school curriculum. People, everybody likes beauty and truth. It doesn't matter which background they come from. And Hinduism represents beauty and truth, right? Through the arts, through the dances, and truth through self empowerment and self knowledge. So our main challenge is in India, and Jaipur Dialogues has done tremendous work in that. But this, you can never stop and rest. This is a battle that will go on. And that's what gives meaning to the life of each one of us. When we are fighting on the battlefield, you're not thinking about other things. You're not thinking about, hey, have I published X number of papers or X plus one number of papers? It's every moment one can die. As a warrior, you have no time to think of idle matters. And I think that's the way we have to live. If we live like that, not only will our life be happy, but we would have spread this happiness and this technology of self empowerment to everybody else from all cultures, to all backgrounds, to all races, because this is a universal message. The same Purush, the same consciousness is within each person.
That's such a fabulous, optimistic, and realistic, not optimistic only as a lotus eater, but realistic assessment and the prescription that you have given Professor Subhashji today. It's a delight to hear. And I think the viewers must have recognized that as individuals, we have to be warriors. We have to do things that what we can in our individual capacity, bring about a collusion and a collaboration of the communities, and use the institutional framework of temples and what we have to make it happen on a long-term basis. And thank you very much for telling the people about what we do at Jaipur Dialogue. And yes, it is our intention to rewrite our narrative, which has been lost because of so many colonial impressions. And I just wanted to tell the viewers, now since the United Consciousness thing came about, that our event, which is happening in person for the first time in the last 3 years that we have been using technology and science, it is also online. So please register and support us, because that's the message. What Subhashji told you today or shared is what we are trying to do for the world around us. So delighted to. And Subhashji, thank you very much for coming. And as you rightly said, one conversation will not end the issue. We need to talk about it in more ways than one. So we are loved and liked by people around. As a South American friend of mine told me, we love your faith. And it's a very important one. Just happened a few days ago. He says, because your faith is based on truth. And he's a Catholic person. He said, we love your philosophy because it's based on truth. So thank you very much for joining today. Viewers, please like, subscribe, and support our channel. Please press the bell icon. We are with you. We are fighting for you. We are fighting for ourselves. And as a Kshatriya and a warrior, we are in the game. So, Satyamev Jayate, for Satya to triumph, we all have to fight and stand for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vibhuti ji. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.